So designing a motorcycle, knowing that the early versions are going to be open to the public, was actually super exciting. Having that feedback really early is so much different than other places where I've worked, where you do everything in the quiet and the dark and have a big unveiling at the end. There's a bit more excitement there, but also there's a lot more risk that you're not getting that early user feedback. Taking people's real feedback and bringing it in really early in the process so that the Gen 1 publicly available bike has a lot of that user input already included, which is an awesome change. So one downside of having that publicly available as you're going through the development process is that any mistakes or even just changes, improvements that you make become part of the social media that, like, hey, why is the headlight different? We're making improvements along the way. And we try to be as open as possible, showing folks all around the world what we're doing with the bikes. It's a little strange to me having that all be open for public consumption. So it's a double-edged sword. It's got improvements and some challenges that come along with it. We do here at Buell have a race shop that's actively making all kinds of changes and modifications to these bikes and taking them out in public during the development process. We have learned through the development process, through testing, a lot of things that can also incorporate the feedback we get from those stunt bikes and other modifications that have been made. So we're able to make improvements that are going to make the everyday riding of these bikes better. And that's the exciting part, is having that feedback early enough that we can include it in the first revision of this bike. Of course, the downside is you do get into a little bit of analysis paralysis, where we're getting so much feedback from the public that we have to kind of rethink a lot of the decisions that we've already made and move past. Things like color and trim, luckily, are not affecting the performance of the bike as much, but they do lead to a lot of second guessing of decisions and loops that we go through to get to the final product. We do have a development plan that we're working through, and we have to prioritize the feedback. Performance, quality, durability are right at the top, and we need to make sure that we get that right with this new bike. Things that are more features, nice to haves, just get prioritized a little bit less when it comes to user feedback. And we do have a large parking lot of ideas for improvements that will be kind of squeaked in at the last minute before start of production, or things that we look at for the next model year along the way, if we can make little changes along the way. Something that I am really proud of that might not be obvious to riders is we've got a lot of engineers that are very passionate riders that are out using the bikes, testing the bikes, whether it's formal testing on a test track or specific activities that we've got going on for their harsh durability, or just putting miles on bikes, making sure that they're durable, that they're ready to go. And all of that feedback is used to make daily changes to the bikes. Whether it's something simple like changing a license plate bracket, or something more complex like changing control locations, the folks on the team, whether it's the manufacturing team, the quality team, the engineering team, are all providing input from actually riding the bikes. And being passionate riders, they know what passionate riders care about. Having a group of people here that are passionate about motorcycles, from the CEO to the interns, really leads us to make decisions that make sure that we get the ultimate performance out of this vehicle. For sure, having a high-powered bike that's under 500 pounds was a benchmark for this vehicle development that leads to a ton of things regarding the feel, the performance of the bike. It's obvious when you hop on the bike that it's a lightweight bike, and it's obvious when you hit the street that it's got a crazy amount of power and performance. And we're really, really proud of the fact that it feels like you're on a sport bike that's dressed up like a cruiser. One of the challenges that we faced that really felt like we were making a big step forward when we got past it was the design of the frame. Of course, you go through a lot of early FEAs, a lot of analysis goes into how well is this bike going to perform. And because of the speed of the development of the bike, we had to rely on a lot of that early FEA to drive what the direction of the frame would be. And when we got to a point where we had a solid frame that everybody felt we could rally around, it really felt like now we're cruising, heading in the right direction. So in order to move the process through really quickly through the development of a motorcycle, we rely on finite element analysis, FEA, to prove out digitally that the changes we're making or the new designs we're developing are actually going to perform as intended on the street, providing a safe, comfortable, high-performance vehicle. So how do we stay true to the tradition of Buell? First and foremost, we're an American performance motorcycle company. We've got a strong heritage that we need to represent and stay true to, but we also are getting a ton of feedback of what people want the new Buell to be. And that up front, being an American powerhouse it's a big deal, and it's awesome to feel the groundswell. When you're riding a test bike and you stop to get fuel somewhere, people are stopping and they're congratulating you, they're patting you on the back, they're checking out the bike, but they're also like, man, you guys being here in Grand Rapids is awesome. And that's, honestly, it's a great feeling to walk around with, just to feel that on a regular basis. I think a challenge to engineering was starting off with such an iconic design as a kind of fabricated motorcycle, and then trying to change that into something that's production ready, meets all the requirements of the road, led us to just making a lot of prioritization decisions along the way, and trying to remind ourselves as we went through the early FEAs and kind of the analytical side of understanding what decisions we could make based on the electronic data that we had, and then pairing that with, we were making motorcycles early, right? So V1 bikes came out right away. We had them on the road. You had to pick through a little bit because some of the parts were fabricated and just there to keep the bike moving, versus others that were kind of nearly what we were going to have in production, and just kind of sorting through all of the issues along the way to make sure we're solving the issues that were likely to be real issues on a production bike versus something that was just, hey, this is something that we duct taped together to get it going down the road for this first trial. We recently completed a test trip out west, and we were really focusing on a bunch of different things while we were out there. It was basically a month of torturing these bikes, doing hot fuel handling, putting them in really hot situations. So things that riders are gonna do for real. So a real slow crawl down the Vegas Strip when it's 115 degrees, just to make sure our cooling system could handle that, and also provide fuel on a consistent basis to the bike. We did a lot of mountain climbing in Colorado. So we went up to Colorado Springs, we did Pikes Peak a handful of times. Lots of different case scenarios that we put. We put 2 riders and a bunch of extra weight on the bikes to see how it would climb with that. We put reduced fuel in to see how does it handle kind of right at the bottom of the tank, just to make sure there's durability. And then kind of the final durability when we did, after more heat testing out west in California and through Death Valley, then we went out into the desert and onto dirt roads and into the dust, and just see how much dust we could pound into the bike to make sure our emissions activities were still going to be working well, that the air filtration into the airbox was going to be okay, and just that the bike would survive a lot of, bumps and bruises and other things that it's going to see in real life, just doing it in a real compact way. A moment that happens every time we go to a new venue. So whether it's we do a big loop out to Moab or down in Daytona or Sturgis, or we recently did Pikes Peak and the Vegas Strip and test tracks all around the place, consistently when we roll the bikes out of the trailer, you get that feedback from people of, hey, what's that? Like it's a cruiser, but there's something different about it. Like it's clearly a whole lot of American muscle hiding underneath that cruiser design. And then the folks that get on it just have that smile that's like, holy cow, this does perform like a performance vehicle, whether it's on the track or whether it's doing burnouts, whether it's all the crazy stuff that we do at different events. But there's that groundswell that I mentioned earlier of kind of American pride, that this is going to be an American cruiser, an American performance cruiser. It's really exciting to watch every single time. Probably the funniest thing I saw from the out west test trip that we just completed kind of an unexpected test was as we're doing dust ingestion testing, I actually learned from social media that we were doing jumps on the cruiser. Which is, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous because it's a little outside the boundaries of what we're trying to do on the test plan, but it's just cool to see. People just acting like kids because they're on the bike and it's so much fun, but also the fact that it is durable to do goofy stuff like that and all kinds of other off-road stuff that we've done that prove that it's a badass bike. I think the one thing I'd want people to take away with regard to what it's like to be in an engineering team in a company like this, the fact that the whole company being passionate motorcycle riders who are kind of passionate about the performance side of things, but also passionate about the made in America side of things, is that it affects the decisions that we make every day. So we're not deciding, from a spreadsheet, what's the right cost benefit analysis here. We're basing everything on the rider experience. Like, is this gonna be great for the rider, or is this gonna be a turnoff? And that's the primary driver that goes into all the decisions we make, is just how is it gonna impact the rider? We've got an awesome power plant that we're building around. So it's proven, it's been out on the road for a long time. There's a lot of value in being able to reuse the powertrain side of things and put it in a new skin. And the value of that is we can focus on the things that are changing and making them better while relying on the legacy stuff that got carried over to provide an awesome bike at a reasonable price. So far, the bikes have been doing really well as they go through extended mileage, abusive mileage. Like, we're hard on these bikes. We've learned some things that have caused us to make small adjustments to make sure that we're making them more robust so that we don't have in-the-field failures. But in general, there haven't been a lot of surprises with respect to any of the durability stuff, which pays tribute to the engineering team that did a lot of upfront analysis to learn digitally what the bike was going to go through and what we needed to design around to make that successful. So when marketing shows up and says they want to take all of your bikes and just drive them across the country, do a big Moab loop, go up into Canada, it's pretty scary, because it's like, hey, these are our prototypes, we're working on stuff, it's not fully polished, we're probably going to have a couple embarrassments along the way, maybe a tow truck. So yeah, there was a lot of apprehension from the engineering side at the beginning of that, but it actually worked out really well because it was a lot of thousands of miles logged in a really brief amount of time with quite a few bikes, and it helped us build the open issues list. And at the end of the day, as we approach start of production, the thing we do is we look at the list of open issues, prioritize, and start tackling them. And it's a lot easier to tackle them before start of production than after. So making the switch from single disc to dual, and also at the same time choosing Fox suspension, was a pretty big deal with respect to the opportunities it opened up for us to make improvements to the motorcycle on an ongoing basis. For sure, the dual disc Brembo setup lets us have a lot of opportunity to do ongoing development. Parts are more readily available. We can get the best of a lot of different products that are a little more common in the industry. So sometimes being weird isn't the best way to have the best of all worlds. And on the Fox side, working with the Fox factory has been amazing. So far, riding with the Fox suspension has been great. It's interesting. We do have to there's a lot of compromise there because we're trying to keep the performance side of it. So if you're used to the cruiser that's like really cush, and you lose a lot of performance from that. So we did have to make a lot of compromise along the way to understand what's the balance we want between performance and comfort. Luckily, this suspension package has a lot of adjustability. So depending on your personal use case, you can make those adjustments along the way. And I think we found a good sweet spot to start from as far as the way they're going to roll out the door.